Welcome comments. Oh, it's in progress. No worries. Thank you very much for joining the forum. It has been a long time since we've had a forum, and I'm very, very much looking forward to resuming these in person and on a more regular schedule when we return to the normal times. This evening, I'm really pleased that we've been joined by Ian Douglas, who is a water quality engineer with the City of Ottawa. There's periodically good discussions, and I know people have a lot of questions about water. I am forever impressed both with the quality of our water, with the enormity of our water infrastructure and how complex a system it is, as well as the absolute professionalism that we see demonstrated day after day by our water staff. There really is no more fundamental a job that a city councillor and a city have than providing fresh drinking water. I think when the pandemic began in March of 2020, probably my second question to the city manager was, what about the water? And they were well prepared already, almost the same day for exactly how we were going to make sure that our water supply was protected. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Ian. I am, of course, joined by the Kitchissippi Ward staff, 4/5 of the Kitchissippi Ward staff. Fiona Mitchell is here. Fiona runs the planning. Very, very busy portfolio in my office. Tom is in charge of sort of transportation. It takes up most of his time. He works on all the traffic calming files, transportation systems, LRT systems. A lot of the casework that we do in the office on a day-to-day basis is handled by Emma, who is here with us as well. And I do want to say I am very sorry that Emma is going to be leaving us in mid-August. Emma has been an amazing asset in the office, and certainly one of the best decisions I made as a city councillor was to bring her on board. I think a lot of you know her. She does wind up dealing with a lot of the very, I'll call them challenging human files in the office, which is it's challenging work. And Emma, thank you very, very much for the years that you've put into the service of Kitchissippi Ward. I know that I will miss you, my colleagues will miss you, and I know that the ward will miss you.
Wow, so much, Jeff. I'm really touched. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to serve Kitchissippi. It's been a real treat. And you're not free of me yet, so.
But I will say, Emma, if I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to get that thanks from myself and from the ward. And if you do want to take off a beautiful summer evening, maybe watch the Habs Leafs game, please go on ahead.
I'm an avid hockey fan. Thank you so much, Jeff. Have a great night, folks. If you ever need to get in touch with me, you know where to find me.
Thank you, Emma. Only a couple of other quick remarks from me. Those of you who have emailed in the past weeks have received an automatic reply indicating that we are and it's going to take us a while to answer many of the emails that are coming into the office. The pandemic has, and I'm not the only one, I know multiple city councilors have experienced the same thing. It really has doubled to tripled our workload with the same resources in the office, and it has been difficult for us at times to get to everything as quickly as we would like. So thank you much for your patience. For those of you who have been writing to us, who have had to wait a little while longer, we're triaging the work as best we can to try to get to the most urgent items first. And there is the option of calling 311 for a lot of routine matters in the office. When you call us about a pothole, we call 311. So given the workload that we have, give 311 some consideration as an option for some of the routine day-to-day matters. The things that are obviously taking up most of my time is the plan that is constantly heating up. We are really overwhelmed with development files in the ward, and I don't know if Fiona has a plan to sort of put up the development files list that we're working on. And some of the transportation questions, traffic calming, the demand for traffic calming went through the roof with the beginning of the pandemic. I think a lot of folks were home and started seeing, what the traffic is like on their streets, and began to in their numbers than previously, help from our office in addressing that. So we are doing the best we can to keep up. And I am hoping that we get back to sort of normal times, late this summer, early this fall, and can begin addressing all of your concerns with the attention that I normally want to give to the concerns that you have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Fiona, who will just take you through how the evening will work.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm sure a lot of you have done public engagements with us over the course of the pandemic, where we've had to switch to this online virtual model. So tonight we're in the webinar format. So you'll notice you're not on video and you're not able to speak out loud to us. We've decided to do it that way just to really streamline the Q&A process. But we're always willing to be a little bit flexible. So if you haven't done this with us before, the chat function is open tonight, but when we are going to Q&A, I'm not going to look at the chat. I'm only going to look at the Q&A. So if you're on a desktop, it should be, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. There's an example question in there right now. As the questions come up, I'm going to read them out loud. This one says, "Hi gang, Heather Mitchell here. Can you hear me?" So I'm explaining we can see you, but not on video, obviously. I've clicked the button to answer that question out loud, so you should see that question now on your screen. And then when the panelist has finished answering the question, we'll click done, and then it moves into another column. So that's how we're going to do the Q&A tonight. So any questions you have for Ian Douglas as he's speaking, we'll run through a Q&A of that afterwards. But you can input them at any time while he's speaking, but we'll read them out afterwards, and I'm only going to read them from the Q&A. And then any questions you have for Jeff or any member of our team, same thing, throw it in the Q&A, and I will read it from there. I'm going to leave the chat open because I'm trusting the 45 of you that are here are all going to be well behaved, and if you want to shoot something in there or a link or whatever, feel free. But for questions, I'm only going to pay attention to the Q&A. The agenda tonight is very straightforward. Very shortly, I guess Jeff's already given his kind of overview. So very shortly, Tom and myself will just go over some quick updates on our end. A lot of them I'm sure you're already all looped into. And then I'm going to, I'm going to call on people to make very brief community association updates. So I will promote the community association person to a panelist, and you will give us a very brief 2-minute update on what's going on. And we'll also include our 2 business improvement areas. Both Judy and Dennis are here tonight. So we'll run through that really quickly, and then we'll get into Ian's presentation. He's going to speak to you for a period of like 15-20 minutes. Then we'll take Q&As specifically for Ian. And then as that kind of winds down, like Ian specific questions, then we'll move into general questions for Jeff or our team. So if that sounds good for everyone, I'll turn it over to Tom for some of his quick updates.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I think the big thing for me, as Jeff mentioned, is traffic calming. We're definitely in traffic calming season. Usually the reinstatements of existing measures come in mid-April, and then we start seeing new measures around the end of June. I was actually expecting that all to be delayed because, you know, the pandemic has caused all sorts of delays, but we're actually starting to see some of our new measures popping up already, which is great news. Now, of course, traffic calming can be extremely polarizing. There are solid opinions on either side. And one thing that we hear quite often is, you know, I didn't know about this. I wasn't consulted. Why is this on our street? And the simplest explanation is we had 95 streets on our list for this year, and there simply isn't time to do 95 public consultations. So the thing about traffic calming, the temporary traffic calming, is they are seasonal. Come in, if someone requests it, I and I collect data. If that data is up in our top sort of or so, then we put the measures in. And, you know, it does happen from time to time that they prove to be very unpopular. And then in the off season, say November, there's a little more time to go out and I'll flyer the block. And if people really don't like it, we can always take them out. So that's basically what's going on with traffic calming. We'll see all the new installations in probably by the end of June now, and maybe a few more later on in the summer if our budget allows. You know, there has been some talk lately of, you know, planning and how we should try to, so we don't need temporary traffic calming. So to that note, transportation master plan is still being refreshed. It's a very, very long process. Talked to the senior project manager today. More public engagement is coming up this summer, so look out for that. He wasn't exactly sure, you know, what form that's going to take, whether it's going to be a survey or some Zoom type. But as soon as that's firmed up, I'm sure we will, and then we will pass that on to you. Lots of road projects. Of course, I think one of the biggest ones coming up, Byron, Athlo, and Highcroft. Probably start in a couple months or so. Richmond Road is due to be resurfaced later this year. That's all. And of course, LRT continues. We had that meeting with the Stage 2 team for McKellar Park in Westboro. 80 questions. The first batch is in. I hope to have the first batch of answers up on our blog as soon as I can. And I believe that's it for me for now, Fiona.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. I'm going to be equally as brief. So as Jeff mentioned, planning development, there is a lot going on. In case you don't know, we have on our website here, we have a Kitchissippi Development Overview page that I try to keep updated as often as possible. Here, I'm tracking all of what I call like our major files. So if there's been an application that's been sitting dormant for like 2-3 years and we're not talking about it right now, it's probably not on this list. Or if something was approved and construction is still like a few years away, or they're not talking to us about when they want to start or even move forward with site plan, again, it's not going to be on here. These are all the things that are active conversations right now. It's a mix of official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendment applications, as well as site plans. And then, so you can see here, there's always going to be the address, and it'll link to the original blog post with that information. And it'll always include the link to the DevApp site. And if we've had a public meeting, I will also include the link to where you can find that recording on YouTube. So you can just, I'm not going to go into each of these in a lot of detail. Those who are active, you know, the ones that you're talking about extensively right now. I just want to make sure people are aware. I also include a recently improved section, so you can kind of track the progress of things, as well as either upcoming or currently under construction. I'm noticing personally, and I'm sure you all are too, I guess with the impacts of the pandemic last year, kind of pushing or pausing a lot of substantial construction, we're seeing a lot of construction this year. So I'm sure you're aware the Loblaw site under construction, 99 Parkdale continues to be under construction. We've got Hamilton starting soon. We've got 1976 Scott Street starting soon. So there's just lots of projects across the ward. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of keep those updates there. And same thing, I've linked to the YouTube recording of where we do those pre-construction meetings. So if you missed it, you can kind of get up to speed on what the general process is for that. So I'll stop sharing that. The only other thing that's worth mentioning at this point is obviously like the official plan is still an active and underway conversation. On June 3rd, later this week on Thursday, we're hosting a multi-ward specific meeting to discuss the OP in the context of renters. There is information on that in our blog, and I'll throw in a link into the chat once I'm done speaking. It's being organized, it was at our request, but we're not at the helm, so it's not like me operating the webinar, it's the city team operating it. So there's an event Bright link that you have to register for, but it's still in the Zoom format. So I'll send that information. After the As We Heard It report comes out, we're going to be working on some sort of ward specific meeting as well. So if you're not a renter, don't worry, there's still going to be a meeting coming up. And that's going to be a process that's going to keep going for the next few months over the summer. So I think that's it for my updates. But again, if there's any questions that come up in the Q&A, happy to speak to those. I am going to move now to the community updates. I've only had 3 people, so I'll start to call on those who have messaged me already. So first we're going to hear from, I'm going to go in bottom order. So we're going to go Wellington Village Community Association. Kimberly, I'm eminently promoting you into a panelist to give updates. I'm just trying to find you. This is again why we need some like hold music. Promote to panelists. Okay.
There's a search function at the top of the participants, eh?
Okay, well, it's a lot to talk and type and read, and there's a lot going on.
Thank you, Fiona.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So I'll try to be quick. So the Wellington Village Community Association, we recently surveyed local residents on the development of Tunney's Pasture, and we received over 500 submissions. We're using the survey's data to guide our direction in future discussions with government representatives. And this survey led us to form Neighbors for Tunney's, which is a working group of neighboring community associations, including Champlain Park, Hintonburg, and Mechanicsville. Our goals are to establish priorities, improve communications with PSPC and Canada Lands, ensure public consultation, and possibly speak to the media. Stay tuned for more on that. We held our first Wellington Village plant swap over the Victoria Day weekend. Keeping in line with COVID restrictions, we were able to swap plants with neighbors and interact with each other on social media. We continue to monitor Scott Street construction and stage 2 light rail work, particularly the addition of a bike lane on the south side of Scott Street, the new Smurl Avenue intersection and bridge over the transitway, and the bus detour coming next spring. We continue to keep an eye on development applications, of course, and we participate in pre-application consultation sessions. Our board meets virtually the second Monday of each month, and our AGM will be held in November again this year. That's it for us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm going to respectfully demote you and then promote Lori. I will use the search function. Okay. I have promoted Lori, but it's possible she has stepped away from her computer. That's okay. We will go to Heather and then, oh, she's back. Lori, whenever you're ready, we're happy to hear the updates from the MCA.
Here I am. Yep. I'll try to be fast. The NCC rezoning application for Lazy Bay Commons. So that's the green space along Burnside. We've now given it a name. No word if it'll go to Committee of Adjustment in June. GoFundMe page raised $5K, used for legal review, and we made the lawyers made a formal, will be making a formal submission to the city planner. Letters have been written to 4 ministers, city planning committee, petition signed with over 9,000 people. We undertook a socially distant protest on the SJAM on Earth, and we have more signs and protests going down once it's lifted, the lockdown's lifted. The Forward Avenue crisis shelter is to be used for fire department training, probably has, and then demolition for the CCOC affordable housing complex. I just want to say CCO has been so refreshing to work with and have addressed MCA and neighbors' concerns. I can't say enough about them. Brazil finally started blasting after weeks of Ramho work that almost tortured people for their 6 levels of underground parking for its 240 luxury apartments on 99 Parkdale. It was bad for tenants working from home and trying to homeschool. It just about drove them nuts. Mechanicsville is looking like a bit of a war zone with all the developments going on. Good news is the tender closed on La Roche Park contamination remediation and the new field house. We're eagerly awaiting the construction schedule. I just heard from Louise today, and it's going to proceed after waiting for decades. We did a plant rescue for all the perennials in front of that building yesterday and today, and relocated them to our Russian seniors behind the Russian church. And a huge thanks to Dave Alston on the walking tour. Boy, did we get a lot of good publicity out of that. And it's a lot of fun. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm going to respectfully demote you, and then I will be bringing up Heather Mitchell with Westboro Community Association. And after that, it'll be Heather Pearl. Heather, whenever you're ready to give some updates. You're just muted. There you go.
There we go. Can you see and hear me? Oh, there I am. I see myself. Hello, all. Thank you for giving me the chance. I'm going to talk about upcoming stuff. We're very excited that mark your calendars on June 21st at 7 p.m. We're organizing along with our partners with Connecting to Nature, Backyards and Beyond. So go on our webpage and sign up. This is for all ages. Kids will love this. This is with Nature Conservancy. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling because I've missed the name here and I should get it right. The Ottawa Carleton Wild Center. So please go on our website and get your in this. I know it's more screen time, but we think it'll be wonderful. The other thing we're looking at doing is in the fall, we're hoping to do some tree planting, venue to be confirmed, hopefully the Labor Day weekend, and we'd like to keep working to improve the tree canopy. In terms of updates, the biggest thing for Westboro was, of course, the infill study. Very, very contentious. I think that a lot of people worked very hard on it, though, even although there was a lot of disagreement about the end result. Planning committee did pass it. I have to say with respect, but we did oppose it because we had certain issues. But I do look forward to working forward. Maybe through the OP laws, we can try to shore up some of the real serious problems that we do see in the study. But thank you for all your work. And I want to thank a board member who's no longer with us, whose name is Karen Johnson. Maybe some of you know her, and Gary Ludington. They worked very hard on this infill, as did the councillor and the city. We also worked with 2 projects on Carling that have gone forward. Fiona mentioned them already. Our board member Sue worked very hard on that. One of the Roosevelt projects, there's several Roosevelt projects, but one of them that was taken by the Westboro group to LPAT, that did not pass. LPAT did not agree with the community, so that project is going forward. And again, thanks to his involvement, and the councillor also helped us out with that. Stephen Sandicott and our board worked very hard on the OP, providing our comments. And we look forward to continuing to work with Jeff and the other CAs on getting some decent comments in on the OP. And I think we're all looking forward to see the what we heard report. And I think that is, oh yes, we had one other project, Highcroft Churchill. That was another project of great concern that we worked on. And again, the neighborhood group, WCA worked with the neighborhood group that was working on that project. That is it for us. Please mark June 21st on your calendars and bring your kids.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to respectfully demote you back to an attendee, and I will be promoting Heather Pearl with the Champlain Park Community Association. So I've just promoted you. Hi, Heather, whenever you want to give us some updates. You're just muted.
Unmute.
There you go.
Here we go.
All right. As usual, we're in the thick of everything. So I live on Zoom now, and working with the FCA and cafes and Ecology Ottawa and let me see, Walkable Ottawa. So I'm trying to pull everything together and be a sort of a generalist and actually work to ensure that they all talk to each other and they're not working at cross purposes. So that's what that's one of the big things that we've been working on. Daniel Buckles is another major participant, and Roland Dorsey as well. So in terms of actual construction in the neighborhood, it was a little bit quiet, and it's starting to ramp up again. We'll have a committee of adjustment in another week or so, but I've met with the developers. We've walked around, done our full assessment. I helped them deliver notices today to the neighbors in the 60-meter circle so that they know what's coming. And it happens to be right next door to Lynn Bank here, so she's satisfied. So if she's satisfied with what they plan to do, then I'm good. and they're probably good too. And in terms of the official plan, I wait on tenterhooks to see what they're coming back with, because I am very concerned about the disconnect between their infill policies and their environmental policies. And I really hope that they've actually been able to marry the two a little bit. That would be great. And I'm also concerned about the timing between the infrastructure master plan coming out and the green space master plan, because they are going to be considerably later than this official plan. And I foresee that there will be problems because all through Kitchissippi Ward, we have failing infrastructure. I know that. And so we need to, we could have a pretty rough 2 years if they don't have the proper policies and bylaws in place to control things. So that's basically us in this community. We've been working again with the NCC to plant trees on the NCC land. We've got a great butterfly garden going, and there are plans for the wonderful spot where we closed the road and linked the NCC and the parkland. So those things are going to be coming up over the next little while. We've got a very, very good group of volunteers working on that. We had the best rink ever this season. So we ended up having a couple of I adapted a certificate that they could give to all of the volunteers for the rink and the ones who worked on the SJAM. So they've all received that. So we've recognized our volunteers in the community. And so I guess we just, yes, Jeff, sorry.
So I was just saying 1 minute.
Oh, okay. And thanks to Tom for his work on a few things that we've done here. And that's really it. So, bye.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm going to respectfully demote you back to attendee. And Linda Brown, I will promote you for the HCA. While Linda's coming in, if someone from Hampton Iona wants to speak, or Island Park, or McKellar, or Civic Hospital, let me know in the chat who I should be promoting. It's possible you missed my message earlier. Okay, Linda.
Hi, Fiona and Jeff and Tom and everyone. I am going to be very brief, just to do it on the fly, because I wanted to just mention a few things. Shout out to our neighbors in Mechanicsville. We were engaged in a letter of support around the proposed embassy development, so we'll see how that plays out. And there are members of our of the HCA who have been active on that working group. As well, we have been engaged with the Wellington Village and Mechanicsville and Champlain Park on the looking at the Tunney's pasture redevelopment. That's early days, but we're keen to be involved in that. And that's been a great experience so far. I really wanted to flag that back in late fall, winter, Cheryl Parrott from our board, who is everywhere and does many things, had flagged the need for a vacant property tax for buildings in particular, vacant buildings, I should say, and that she has just sent in a letter, I believe it was today or yesterday, to the mayor in support of the implementation of that tax. So that is great news, and kudos to Cheryl for that hard work on that. Parks and Rec Master Plan, as everyone is interested in the maintaining or increasing parkland, so too is Hindenburg with the need to look at that, particularly with intensification over time. Like others, we have been massively engaged in the official plan and will continue to do so. I also wanted to flag this fall the 30th anniversary of the HCA. So I don't know if there's going to be a big party, but stay tuned. We'll certainly let you know. 30 years. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'm going to respectfully demote you back to attendee. And I think we have Lauren Cutler with Hampton Iona. So Lauren, I'm going to promote you very shortly. And then we'll do our 2 BIAs. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, and trust I'm unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, not too much with us. We had applied for a grant from the TD Parks people, which would have allowed us to do a number of parks events over the next several months. We did not get the grant. We got one 4 years ago, I think. We didn't get it this time, but we are trying to proceed with the events on a scaled back version. So we had our first one in April, which was a webinar on responsible foraging with Sharon Body, who's we also work very closely with on the restoration of Hampton Park. We are looking at doing some planting in our hydro right-of-way. We're looking at a walk on the Byron Linear Park this fall with Dave Alston, an historic walk. We've been working with Tom, and I think everybody's gotten very frustrated. Between the city and Ontario Hydro, I guess Ontario Hydro is much more difficult to deal with than Ottawa Hydro, about reaching an agreement for the restoration of the hydro right-of-way. Hydro last year did a number of cutting of the larger trees that might have been interfered with the line. But as part of that, they are supposed to be providing funding up to $10,000 to us for replanting in that corridor, but the city has to reach an agreement with Hydro before we can get that. And not sure where the difficulties have been, but I guess Tom knows that better than I do. We ran a much different skating rink this year, and I have to say that seasonal recreation was a frustration point. I'm not sure maybe it's new staff, but if they have a really good appreciation of how these rinks actually operate on the ground with volunteers. But we had a very successful year. The rink was used more than I think any other year, partially due to COVID. There was no seemed to be no concerns about the loss of the trailer this year because we would not open the trailer or the washrooms because of COVID. But the city fought us on that for quite some time, which made no sense since we've also had a history of mold and toxic fungus growing in our trailer. A couple of small infill projects that are going to committee of adjustment, or they've been to committee of adjustment, they're going to LPAT. And Hampton Iona is going to be working, we've started to work on coming up with a strategy for what type of support we will give to committee of or LPAT appeals, particularly financial support, based on various factors. Is it in our area, what our position was on the project to begin with, what kind of impact it has, reasons for neighbors challenging or wanting to challenge the developer who's challenging the decision. And we're looking at having our AGM later this month. Once that date has finalized, we will advertise it through Jeff's newsletter and social media. I think that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren.
You demote me now.
Yeah, demote. Thanks. And next up, we'll do Sybil from McKellar Park. And as I'm promoting Sybil, Carol has mentioned we used the LPAT acronym earlier. So LPAT stands for Local Planning and Tribunal, Local Planning Action.
Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, what we used to know as the OMB, the Ontario Municipal Board. So it's the body that hears appeals of decisions by City Council, essentially.
Perfect. And I love recording myself being stupid on Zoom. So that's great. That's captured for all eternity. Sybil, please take it away with some updates. Just need to be unmuted.
There. Okay.
There you go.
There we are. All right. McKellar hasn't. We don't have the development that other communities have going on, but we're sort of looking at the long term. We're quite concerned about the official plan. We did have a Zoom meeting with that Jeff's office kindly helped happen. And we put in a brief, and we're anticipating what will come out next week. With the city will come out with what they've heard. We feel our community is going to be really, it's going to really affect us. We're R1 at the moment. That's not going to stay that way. But with the real intensification that's going to come, we're wondering about the effects of, like, can we get more parks? Can we get more trees? Can we, is the infrastructure, are we going to proportionately get the same number, the amount of infrastructure to support the homes that will be built? We're also, so there will be, our community association will continue to be quite active in that particular file. Where I think Tom would have some sympathy with this, that there have been some traffic calming done in our community, and I think that for every traffic calming step taken, it annoys somebody else. So there's a great discussion going on in the community. I walked down the block a day or so ago, and someone's stopped me and harangued for 10 minutes about what was happening on their street because of the traffic, which is fine. I mean, they have a legitimate concern, and that's fine. They didn't know I was involved in the community association. They thought I was a person walking the dog. One of the people walking with me said that maybe they should get in touch with the community association. Anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. But it's more, I don't think that there's really, this is going to be resolved until the Sherburne station's open, the LRT is running, COVID is gone and we have an idea of what the traffic is so that it can be into a long-term plan. We're hoping to have a tree giveaway with Ecology Ottawa. I guess they do this anyway. We've spoken to them and we've spoken to the Westboro Market, and we're hoping to have it at the market sometime this summer, fall. Everybody seems to be good with the idea. We just have to see if the market can accommodate us. At the same time as will Ecology Ottawa be organized at that point to help to come up with the trees, right? So we'll keep you informed on that. We're very happy that there's going to be a crosswalk at Richmond Road in Wavell. That was big news for us, and we've been asking for it for a long time. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sybil. I'm going to respectfully demote you, and then we are going to hear from Mari with Westboro Beach. And while I am promoting Mari, Lori has asked a question in the chat. I'm going to read that in the Q&A. And if you have any questions that you want us to answer, please put them in the Q&A. It's a lot for me to moderate both the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions you want us to read out loud and have a discussion about, please put them in the Q&A, although Tom has now answered your question. And with that, Mari, please give us some updates.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Just to continue with the traffic from McKellar Park, we too are very concerned about traffic at Westboro Beach. The beach is no longer neighborhood beach, and it is already a destination, and we still have the LRT development and the densification of homes, condos, and apartments. Tom has been helping us with the traffic situation around the beach. I think we have a lot more that needs to be done. I think it is time to look at that whole area as a whole, instead of just up to date only on Atlantis. But we are very concerned. The parking lot is always full, that people are still haphazardly, and we feel they are speeding, and it is quite a dangerous situation for the pedestrian and especially for the children. We are now starting to concentrate on the beach. We are starting our weekly cleanup of the beach and shoreline. We're working with river keepers on using mussels to filter the beach water, and we've got some donation for that project. And we are working hopefully on the tunnel mural, but also the pollinator garden, the royal woods, and the regeneration of the urban forests further east. The NCC has so far been very helpful in all our projects. We've had many negative graffiti along the old CBC pathway. Many were racist in nature, so we have decided that it's time to have a mural painted, and we are raising funds, and we are almost there, and we thank our counselor for his donation. Thank you, Jeff. And I think we will have a mural, a nice mural. We have two young artists who are willing to work on the mural, and if we don't raise enough funds, they're willing to forego their honorarium. So, but we hope we will get enough funds so that we can at least give them an honorarium. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mari. So we have with us here tonight reps from our two BIAs. We're running short on time though. So Judy and Dennis, I'm going to ask you
to put your updates for the Westboro Village BI and the Wellington West BI in our chat. Make sure you click all panelists and all attendees, and that way folks can read what you have going on. And if anyone has any questions for Judy or Dennis, you can throw it. Those ones you can throw in the chat, or you can throw in the Q&A and I'll read it out loud, whichever you prefer. So sorry, Dennis and Judy, feel free to put your updates. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to introduce Ian.
I wasn't given a bio. Ian Douglas is a water quality engineer with the City of Ottawa, a longtime professional employee of the municipality. He daily brings a level of professionalism. Ian, welcome. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us about water.
Yeah, my pleasure, Councillor, and thank you. The intro was perfect. You got a great radio voice. Maybe I'll just share my screen right now.
Yep, let me give you the ability.
Oh, okay.
You should be able to do so now.
Okay. Screen share. Okay. And we'll go into mode. Can you see a title slide there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunities to talk. I love talking about water. As Councillor Leeper mentioned, I've worked for 29 years for the City of Ottawa. And as I mentioned at Council, I live, work, and dream water, at least in my professional world. So we're really proud of our water supply in Ottawa. And I thought tonight I could just show you a few images and a few ideas to maybe spark a few questions, but I'd like to focus most of our time on question and answer. I always like hearing interesting questions and comments and concerns about our drinking water. So with that, here's 10 things that you probably didn't know about Ottawa's drinking water. I didn't count them, so don't hold me to it, but I thought we could start with one of the most important things, and that's our source water. You know, we are so fortunate to have this amazing river really as the lifeblood running through our city. This is the watershed, and you can tell it's massive. In fact, the maritime provinces fit into our watershed. And the other great thing is that about 93% of it is wilderness. About less than 1% that's actually developed, and about 6% that's agricultural land. So that means that we have a reasonably pristine source of water, a very large source of water that's naturally soft and just a beautiful resource, aside from the actual beauty and ecology of the watershed. We also have a fairly low human population and a fairly low amount of industry upstream of the city. So just as a pop quiz question, what percentage of this river do we use in the city every day for our residents and for our businesses? So you can think about that. I'll give you the answer. It's less than 1%. So we use about 0.2% of the river that flows by our city. And of course, that is used domestically and industrially, and then is treated at our sewage plant and discharged back to the river. So this is our amazing river. I don't know if there's too many cities in the world that can claim to have something like this going right through the heart of the city. I like to say it's rocks and trees and water, to quote the arrogant worms. And of course, that has an impact on the quality of our water. So the Ottawa River would be typical from an engineering perspective of a northern river, that being high in color, a very rich organic source. If you've seen the river, it looks like tea. It's got that natural color, very soft. And it does have a little bit of a taste, kind of an earthy, a grassy taste. It is certainly there, certain times of year more prominent, but I like the taste, but it is different. And so the kinds of components that are in the water from a treatment perspective Here are some of the things that are in the raw water that hopefully we'd like to remove before it gets to your tap. And here's some more things that are in the water. And the differences between these is, maybe you can guess, between the first list and the second list. This becomes important from an engineering perspective. The first list are particulate components that are in the water, things that are suspended in the water, including, obviously organisms and bacteria and viruses and so on. The second list are things that are dissolved in the water, as I mentioned, that tea color. And we'd like to remove almost all of these elements from the water to come up with clear, fresh, and safe drinking water. Now, those are the natural things in the water. What about our human impacts? Have we and do we continue to impact the quality of the Ottawa River? And this picture sort of gives it away. You can see the raft of lumber there. I found this photograph, which I found remarkable. The biggest impact on our river has been the log drive. And I'm told that the harvest of lumber on the Ottawa watershed is the largest on the planet, period. And that occurred over about 100-year period, maybe a little bit longer. But if you're the river, if you think like a river for a second, you wouldn't even see sunlight in this situation. If you look closely in the middle, you can see a little dog kind of balanced on those logs that are floating there. So yeah, that obviously had a huge impact on the quality of the river, but that has largely ceased. And I think the river has returned back to a more traditional, essentially pristine quality of water. But we also have had some industrial activities in the watershed. Here's a few examples. And so you might say, well, is it possible that we have some of these other man-made chemicals and elements that might be of concern from drinking water? Well, to answer that question, as you probably know, there's been tremendous advances in analytical chemistry. And just as an example, back in 1931, I have all the reports going back to 1931 and actually earlier in my office. And back then we analyzed 8 substances that told us the quality of our drinking water and the river as well. Well, today that's quite different. We now analyze over 300 trace substances. And the short answer is we don't find those substances. And we have probably the most comprehensive monitoring program in the country. And we use about 8 different laboratories using very sensitive methods. The only thing we occasionally see, you're wondering, well, what do we see from time to time? We do see 1 trace level of metformin, which is a pharmaceutical presumably from sewage effluent upstream of the city. Again, it's at a tiny concentration. Occasionally, we'll just detect also a trace of DEET, which is the insect repellent that most of us are familiar with. But essentially, we look for these hundreds of substances, we don't find them. And that to me speaks to the pristine quality that we have. A little bit on our treatment works. This is our first waterworks. I think it might be just outside the ward boundary on the east side. But this was the Fleet Street Waterworks, 1874. On the inside, looked like this. Remarkable in that it's all hydraulically driven. So there's no electricity. Water power from the Chaudière Falls drives turbines, which drives all the pumps. And we're still using this facility today. So all the water produced at Lemieux Island comes here, and all the energy for pumping that water comes out of this state, still hydraulic. So a real green energy situation. But in the early days, there was no treatment. And so the first treatment that we had was chlorine was added in 1912, following a really tragic typhoid epidemic that was a waterborne outbreak. It was equivalent of about 25 Walkertons. So several hundred deaths, fecal contamination got into the water supply. And so chlorine was added in 1912. But there was some really great pioneering work. This is a book by Joseph Race, written in 1918, on the early days of chlorinating drinking water across North America. And he was the chief chemist in Ottawa. So some real pioneering work was done in Ottawa. Our first real treatment plant that had proper treatment came in 1931 with Lemieux Island, which is in Kitchissippi Ward. It's a beautiful facility. When COVID lifts, we'll hopefully open our doors again for the public to see it. A beautiful plant that has many of the traditional engineering techniques for purifying water. As the city grew, a second plant built in Britannia. And interesting that both plants feed water into the same water supply system, so that I don't know if this was an accident or great planning, but if we have a problem at one of the plants or we have to do major maintenance, the other plant can supply the city. And so we use this, this benefit from time to time. So it's a great thing, and not too many cities can boast to have that arrangement. So these are the components that are in the water, and it turns out that our treatment process removes all but these two components. And if you look at this photo, on the left is what the raw river water looks like if you're to scoop it into a beaker in the lab, and on the right is our finished treated drinking water. So how could we take these components and remove them effectively through our treatment process? And I won't give you the full story tonight, but we use what's called a multi-barrier treatment process. So different stages of treatment remove different components, such that by the time the water has passed through these various stages, we know that the water's been engineered properly, it's safe, it's clear, and hopefully tastes good, it's palatable. Basically, the short answer, it uses lots of physics, chemistry, and biology. Probably your three favorite subjects. I'm sure of that from school. So this is here's a couple of things I said. Here's 10 surprising things that you might not know about Ottawa's water treatment plants. So we'll just sort of take a look at these. The first one is that the whole process works on gravity. In fact, there's no moving parts in our treatment process. So we actually take water from the river. We do pump it, of course. We pump it to the front of the plant, which is out here. And we have these huge basins, 85 large basins that pass the water just by gravity. So if you walk in the plant, it's dead quiet. You'll think nothing's happening, but I can tell you there's a lot of chemistry and biology that is happening. And it passes through that plant. So that's interesting. How long does it take a drop of water to pass through the entire treatment process? Is it a few hours? Is it a few days? Well, it depends on what flow rate we're operating, but it's about 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours to treat a drop of water through the entire process. Also interesting is that for the last 15 years, we used to add chlorine right away. As soon as water came into the plant, we killed everything dead in its tracks. We've really reversed that in the last 15 years. It's interesting. We now keep the process biologically active, and we actually encourage safe and good bacteria to grow in our filtration process. And that helps to treat the water. So we've kind of changed our thinking on that. It's more organic. We only add chlorine at the very end of the process. Underneath the plant, right in this midsection, we actually have this huge labyrinth. It's about the size of maybe 5 gymnasiums. And it looks sort of like this from the top, but we force the water to take this long convoluted path through this labyrinth. And why do we do that? It's not just for the fun of the water, but it has to do with the engineering and the hydraulics for disinfection. This is how we know the water has been fully and carefully disinfected. We also handle the treatment in different seasons. The treatment process is quite different in various seasons, so we have to be aware of that. In fact, what do you think is the most difficult or challenging season to operate in? I guess you're muted, but feel free to. Yes, Councillor, do you want to take a stab at that? There's no huge bonus point. Spring. Yeah, spring runoff. Most people suggest spring is tough. Actually, spring's not too bad at all. You know, the amount of particulate matter goes up. It's actually good for the process having particulate matter. It seeds some of the reactions. Some people say summer with all the bacteria and algae growing. The most difficult time is the winter, the dead of winter. Has to do with physics and a bit of chemistry, and might get into that later. But that's the most challenging season is winter. But each season has to be adjusted accordingly. Now, reservoirs, you probably have seen some of our elevated tanks when you drive around the city. But when everyone's sleeping at night, we fill these reservoirs. We store about a day's worth of water. About 300 million liters of water is stored in these reservoirs. They're hidden in the city. You can't see them. There's one at Carlington, there's one at Glencairn, there's one in Orleans. And if you look at it, you'll see this big field and you'll think, why isn't there a soccer pitch there? It's because it's a water reservoir that's sort of built into the city. And so everyone's sleeping at night, we fill those reservoirs. When everyone gets up in the morning, you know, they flush the toilet, shower, do breakfast, that draws those reservoirs down somewhat. Luckily, people go to work and we rebuild those reservoirs, and same thing at the dinner time, their draw. And so that allows us to run the treatment plants at a fairly steady rate while the water supply and the storage go up and down. And we have 14 different pressure zones. Depending on where you are in the city, we pump at different pressures. We have 45 analyzers in each of our plants that are monitoring water at each stage of the treatment. So they're looking at very specific parameters continuously. And these are hooked up to alarms. So if something goes off the rails, they alarm the operator to respond. Now, do we have process upsets? Does the treatment process fail? You can imagine it's a bit of a complex beast. The answer is yes, it does. And I would say it depends on the year, but maybe 4 or 5 times a year, we have to shut the plant off, purge all the water, we drain all the water out of it, and we rebuild the process. It takes about 12 hours. And you're thinking, well, why didn't I hear about that? Shouldn't the health department have advised me? The trick is to catch it with the alarms, and as soon as we see that anything doesn't meet the quality standard, we stop the process, the other plant keeps running, and we rebuild the process. And only when we're happy with quality standards, then it goes back online. And one of the keys to the whole thing is having really great operators, well-trained operators. Each of our plants have 2 12-hour shift operators at all times. And these are very well qualified staff. Each of them get 50 hours a year of technical training in order to maintain their certification and their license. So this really changed after Walkerton. We need really highly qualified people. The water's only as good as the decisions they make as operators. Here's an example. This is Bob Moore, one of our operators, and you can see the operators have their own laboratory to take process measurements each shift and keep a really close tab on the process. And then there's some analyzers you can see on the right there. One more bonus question is that buried in the heart of the plant, in 1989, they built a room way down in the dungeons of the plant, and it is our pilot plant. It's where we do a lot of our research and optimization work. And it was built in 1992, and we have done probably 25 different research projects. Every part of our treatment process has changed because of this research effort. We're also collaborating with about 5 or 6 different universities. Because we have the pilot plant, they want to do research with us. So that's brought a lot of knowledge to Ottawa. And The process needs to be optimized specifically for the Ottawa River. So the process that works great in Ottawa would work terribly in Toronto on the Great Lakes. So it's specific to the chemistry of the source water. The other nice thing about the pilot plant is we can take risks here. We can bring in pathogens, we can push things to a failure point and find out where is that threshold of risk and safety for water. So it's very important. And over the years, we've actually saved about $80 million in capital costs and operating costs through work that came out of this pilot plant. And we're known across the country. If you go talking to other municipalities, they know about Ottawa and a lot of the work that we've done. This is an example of an experiment we've done a few times. This takes about a year of planning, but typically involves a few universities. We buy billions of pathogenic organisms and we inject them into the process under various conditions to see how to optimize the process, all aimed at the safety of the water supply. Now here's an interesting photo, and you might wonder, what is that? First of all, it looks like an old photo. This is actually our first pilot plant. We had one in 1928. It was at Lemieux Island. And this is the one where they worked out the chemistry of the original treatment process for Lemieux Island. So last thing, I'll just say a quick word about aesthetics. Of course, the safety of the water is the primary endeavor for us, but aesthetics are very important as well. It's really how our residents perceive the quality of the water. And it's important that it tastes good, look good, and feel good. So we actually have a taste and odor panel. We do a lot of work in our laboratory checking aesthetics. We also hear from residents. You know, that's an important source of information for us. Councillor Lee has been a great supporter of water, and this is an example of one of his tweets about, hey, the water's tasting great, everyone, and we really appreciate that support for our tap water. I actually showed this at a conference recently, and they thought that was great. I was on a call, it's kind of funny, recently, and this was a team of engineering consultants in Toronto, and they said, you know, wait a minute, my family live in Ottawa. And I said, well, how do they think the water is? You know, what's their impression? He said, well, I'll find out right now. So he texted them during the meeting, and they said, here's the answers that came back. One of them said, it's delicious. So these are people that live in Ottawa. Second one said, I'm still alive. That's encouraging. That's good news. And last, excellent source of water. So I guess in closing, I can say that we're really proud of the work that we've done in Ottawa. However, we are continually improving and trying to not be complacent and to be diligent to make sure that we continue to provide safe and high quality water for our residents. But personally, I can tell you, I've been working for 29 years in drinking water, and I've got the best job in the city, and we have a really strong team that we have a great reason to get up every morning and produce safe drinking water for 1 million people. So as an engineer, it doesn't get a lot better than that. So maybe with that, I'll say thanks for your attention, and I'm very happy to try to answer some questions or hear any comments or concerns as well.
Thank you so much, Ian. I think we're hearing lots of positivity about your presentation. Lots of folks found that very interesting. So I'm going to go to the questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to start obviously with just the water related questions. So if you have any questions for Ian, please make sure you're putting it in the Q&A. There should be a specific Q&A button, and I will read the question out loud and Ian answer, and that way everyone can hear the question and the answer.
Sounds good.
So first one here is, how does Ottawa's drinking water compare to commercially bought drinking water?
Well, that's about a 2-hour answer, but I'll give you the short one. They're different. I mean, different commercial bottled waters depend on the source they came from. Most of them are from groundwater supplies, So right there, and by the way, I think most of them are of good quality. There's an environmental impact of bottled water and a cost impact, but most of the commercially available ones are good quality and are safe to drink. But they're quite different. They're from groundwater sources. They're much higher in mineral content. They can have some other components in there too to watch for. One of the main differences, they're not tested. So there's no requirement to test bottled water. In drinking water, municipal drinking water, there's about 80 substances that are regulated. We have a tremendous amount of regulations, testing. We do 100,000 tests of our drinking water each year. Bottled water companies, there's no requirement. It's classed as a beverage and as a food stuff. There's no drinking water regulations that apply. That said, I think they're generally safe, but I think there's an environmental and the cost impact there.
Okay. Next question. Ian, how old is the force main under La Roche Park? Is it the only force main from Lemieux Island?
I'm gonna have to think about this a little bit. So my guess is there are 2 or 3, now you're talking the drinking water, there's 2 or 3 pipes from Lemieux Island. If you go on the pipe bridge, you'll see some large water mains. One of them goes direct into the high pressure system. One of them goes to the Fleet Street pump station. So there's at least 2 and maybe a third line for redundancy. In case there's a problem with one of them, we can switch to the other line. So I believe there's 2 or possibly 3. And I'm not sure if that's the one that they're asking about.
Okay. Cheryl, sorry, question from Cheryl for Ian. If there was giant rupture, for example, a bombing of a nearby embassy in the high pressure transmission line coming from Lemieux Island, could the Britannia plant supply the entire city, and for how long?
Yeah, so that's changed recently. Again, during winter was always the problem for us. In the winter, our capacity was limited to about 250 million liters a day, whereas the city draws about 300 every day. So we'd be close. However, in the last 2 years, we've upgraded the settling basins at Britannia so that we can now produce over 300, probably closer to 350 million liters a day. So the short answer is yes, we should be able to provide it at least on a short-term basis for a few days if there were to be a major rupture. If there was a major rupture, we'd be able to isolate and distribute that water through a different main. So a water main break should not take down a treatment. The kinds of things that might take a treatment plant down are like the ice blockage we had about 5 years ago at Lemieux Island. So our intake totally blocked with frazzle ice, and we're in the process of redesigning our intake slightly on the Quebec side. I think we're the first municipality to actually, from Ontario, that will draw water from Quebec side. So we have to be friendly with our neighbors across the river. Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, did you have a question?
I did have a question, Fiona. Thank you. No, I'm just wondering at the research side of things,
yeah.
What is the next frontier for drinking water? Is it cost savings, more efficient processes? It seems as though you know how to make the water safe.
Yes, I would say that the main driver has been and continues to be the quality of the water. When we set out on that research journey over the last 25 years, it always was and still is about improving the safety and the quality of the water. The things that we have to be concerned about primarily are waterborne pathogens that are in our source water. And unfortunately, we can't measure them. So we can't monitor for them. So we have to use a lot of pretty careful engineering to make sure that the water has eliminated those pathogens and produced safe water. So I would say the frontier is to improve methods for pathogen control. There's also a lot of interest in alternate disinfection methods like UV treatment is really important. It was never thought UV was useful in drinking water until about 15 years ago. A researcher in the States did some experiments and just as a fluke said, you know what, I'm going to test this theory out. And it was just sort of a loophole that suddenly realized that, hey, UV is really effective for Cryptosporidium and for Giardia. So I would say that the future frontier continues to be pathogen control and maybe some lower energy options, you know, that we can treat water with less energy and more organic approaches to water rather than just, you know, hitting it really hard with chlorine. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. How many water treatment plants do we have in Ottawa?
So in the central supply, there's two. The two that I showed, Britannia and Lemieux, are the two treatment plants. They feed into a common distribution system. Takes water about, if you live near the plants, you're getting water in about 2 to 3 days. If you live on the far ends of, say, Orleans or Manotick or Canada, it could be a day to 2 days before the water gets there. But in addition to the central supply, that supplies about 900,000 people, roughly. We also have 6 communal well systems, places like Harp, Munster, and Vars. These are areas that are too far away, that it's just too far to connect a water main to those communities. So in those cases, we operate a well system, again, with treatment and visual monitoring. So as far as the central supply in the city, it's the 2 plants that provide that.
Awesome. Okay, next question. How many years would you guess it took the river to recover from all that excessive logging?
Well, that's interesting. I have data. We've been monitoring that river since the 1915, 1916. So I have some long-term graphs. I don't think I brought any tonight, but most of the river has been pretty stable. Even the flows and the levels have been fairly stable. The one thing that's changed is there was a lot more particulate matter during the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And that sort of tailored off in the early 70s when logs were no longer allowed to be transported down the river. So less particulate matter and a little bit less color. So I think all that bark and debris contributed some color. So if I had to look back, I would say by about the mid 80s, we were seeing that impact had subsided. And the good thing is the Ottawa River rapids, which provides a lot of oxygen, and it helps to degrade a lot of the organic loading that was left there. But there's still a lot of debris on the bottom of the river. You know, companies that harvest the logs and use it for flooring and so on. So, but what we're seeing now in terms of quality looks pretty similar to what it would have been, you know, previous to the log drive.
Okay. Okay, next question. What might be some of the top risks to our drinking water?
Well, that's a great question. I think I mentioned one of them is the pathogen control, you know, especially as maybe climate changes that might change release of microorganisms. So I think that's always top of mind as a water engineer. That's paramount. On the more management side, one of the things that concerns me is the complexity. We have a lot of regulation, and these plants have a lot of complexity. If you were to walk inside, you'd see a lot of control systems and pumps and alarms and instruments and equipment. And with complexity comes a complicated mousetrap. So my concern is to make sure that operators have enough fundamental understanding that when their automatic systems fail, they know how to operate the plant in a manual way, and that they're focused on the principal treatment. So I think that's one of the challenges. It's like having a car that's on autopilot or cruise control. You know, you want to still be wired back to the fundamentals of treatment. And climate change might be a challenge that we have to deal with. As we know, the river had a historic flood level in 2019, and you know, we may see more of those sorts of events that might pose a challenge to the treatment plants.
Thank you. Are there any new innovations in water infrastructure on the infrastructure replacement / renewal list?
I'm probably not the best guy to ask because I'm really a treatment and water quality guy, but there are some new techniques. I just saw a demonstration 2 weeks ago of lining. So if you have an old water main that's a little bit decrepit, maybe it's a cast iron, they can go in and sort of core it out and get sort of, you know, some of the rust particles out, and they can put a device down it that spins like a liner. It's like a polymeric liner on the inside of the pipe, and it rehabilitates it. So we don't have to deal with corrosion. You don't have to rip up the street and replace the whole water main. So I think that's an interesting development. And there's always, you know, newer materials that they're looking at for water mains. But yeah, those are a couple things that I've seen.
Thank you. We just have a clarifying question. What is a force main?
So force main is usually used in terms of pumping sewage, because most sewage travels in sewers by gravity. Similarly, sometimes it's pumped, and that's usually called a force main. In drinking water, we would say a water supply main, or we would say a header, you know, like a water header, or just a water main. Some places, force main just means there's a pump that's causing the water to flow through that pipe, opposed to flowing by gravity. So it's being forced by the pressure from a pump.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah. Okay. With all the construction projects happening in Ottawa, are you concerned about the possible contamination of groundwater aquifers?
Of groundwater aquifers. Okay.
Aquifers.
Well, within the city, we're not relying on groundwater for our potable water supply. But I think where there is construction, yes, there is the potential that it can impact the aquifer. And so I think when the city does construction projects, we try to get out ahead of time and talk to local people that have private wells and try to get a baseline for what the quality of water is in their well. Because invariably, when the construction starts and there's drilling and blasting and so on, people might come forward and say, hey, my well used to be clear, now it's full of mud. And so, you know, those sorts of concerns can happen. In the city itself, I'm less concerned in terms of the fact that we have our potable water from the river and it's independent of that. Yeah. And as far as contamination, I didn't mention, but you know, the water is under pressure in our water mains continuously. And so that is a real barrier, so that if there's construction, even if the aquifer gets some contamination into it, the water is from the inside of the main outward. So we only really get concerned is if we lose pressure for a sustained period. Other than that, pressure protects the water from contaminants getting into the water.
Okay. There's two questions that are very similar, so I'm going to read them both. Sure. What are the implications of the city expansion over the next 25 years for the current water treatment capacity? Will there be a need for significant expansion of water treatment infrastructure? And then the second one that's basically the same thing is, will there be expansion of our water treatment plant as population grows over the next 25 years?
Okay, those are good questions. I'll look at my crystal ball and I'll tell you what's going to happen. When I was in the city in 92, the population was growing, and our plants were running actually pretty hard at that time. Our capacity was largely being used up. So we actually were in the process of building a third plant in the early 90s, and we never did. Well, what happened? Well, I'll show you quickly this graph if you can see it. So this is a graph of how much water we've produced in the city going back to 1967. So you can see there was a steady climb as the population grew, more and more water every year. And here comes the early 90s, and you can see when I joined here, they thought this was going to go straight up. The water demand was just going to skyrocket as the population grew. Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we built the pilot plant. We wanted to make sure we had the best optimal process for building the third plant. The city bought land in Shirley's Bay to build a third plant. Well, as soon as we did that, you can see things flattened off, and our demand flattened, even though the city population was growing, and then it went down. So we've had look at these decline in the amount of water used in the city, even though the population is increasing. So last year, I'll update this to 2020, we pumped 287 million liters of water on average per day. That's the same as 1982. And you know the city has grown over those years. In fact, here's the population trend over that same time period. So we've had a fairly steady growth, about 2.5% to 3% year over year. And yet the water demand initially rose, flattened out, and has declined. And that's largely due to water efficient fixtures, dishwashers, toilets. People, when I was a kid, every home had a sprinkler going all day long, all summer long. That's how we got our fun running through the sprinklers. People don't do that anymore. So practices, people are a lot more water conserving. And so that's really changed it. Now, it looks like we've flattened out. Maybe from here on in, we're going to start to see some increase. But the average consumption in Ottawa on an average day is about 300 million liters, give or take. Our plant capacity is about double that. So I think in the next 20 years, 25 years, we've got enough capacity, especially if we continue doing upgrades to improve the efficiency. At some point, yeah, there will need to be that, but that's up to the planning department. And in fact, we're doing a 25-year study right now, looking ahead at what treatment changes we might have to consider in the next 20 years, 25 years. So, yeah. Hopefully that answered the question as best I can anyway.
Thank you. Just checking in, we're going to extend this for 5 more minutes. I have so many questions though, so we're not going to get to all of Ian's questions or questions for Ian, but we will do our best in the next 5 minutes. So Scott says, great presentation, Ian. My question is, what percentage of water leaks from the distribution system?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, this is one of those shocking things when I came into the industry. Going back to my early days, about 20%. And maybe 25, and that was shocking to me. And then we looked around other cities in North America, and it was all about the same. 15 to 20% of the water produced at the plants is not getting metered. It's missing in action through leakage, and maybe someone has bypassed their meter or something like that. So the city did a lot of work about 15 to 20 years ago trying it down. And I believe the leakage rate now in Ottawa is about 10 to 12% only, which is considered excellent. But I remember getting a phone call from one of the media outlets saying, it was a voicemail. Hey, Ian, this is so-and-so journalist. Listen, I understand that 20% of the water you produce, you guys can't find it, it's missing. I think we got a story here. Can you give me a call back? So it is through leakage. We also have a leak detection program where crews will go out proactively, and they have a device to listen to the water mains for leaks. And if we find them, we can schedule a repair So we've done a lot of work trying to tidy up our leach, and we've made pretty good progress. Yeah, but it is a little shocking, I must admit.
Okay, is it best to keep the riverbanks green to assist with water purity, or can we tolerate more urban development close to the water source, for example, Embassy Row?
The water that we draw in the core section of the rivers, our intakes are located essentially in the middle of the river because we want to get water that is not impacted by shoreline effects. For example, you know, there's seagulls and other nesting birds at the shoreline. There's water that can be a little more stagnant at the shoreline. We want that fresh core of water coming down the river. So it wouldn't impact us too much. You'd have to talk to maybe some biologists, but I think having naturalized shorelines in general is better. It does provide some of the natural filtering. So that could be affected by development. There could be erosion, there could be sediment and other factors. But from a drinking water perspective, I don't think it would affect us specifically.
Thank you. Try to get a few more in. Would it be possible to distinguish beneficial bacteria, like the ones responsible for vitamin B12, from harmful ones to keep the good ones in the water while removing the harmful ones?
Yes. So the bacteria, the ones I mentioned, the good ones that we use are generally aerobic bacteria, and they just grow naturally on the filter media. So we're passing water, you know, through various treatments. It's passing through a filter media, spending about a half an hour slowly percolating through this granular media. And when it does it, because there's some nutrients there, bacteria will start to grow and they say, hey, this is a great home. I'm going to live in this filter media. This stuff's great. I've got sand, I've got anthracite to hang on to. I can make a home here. The benefit of that is the bacteria will use up a lot of the small organic molecules that are there. Those are nutrients that otherwise would go into our water distribution system. And nutrients in the water distribution system are not good. That means you can get biological growth in the water mains, biological growth in people's plumbing, and it can lead to some pathogenic organisms like Legionella in hospital settings and seniors' homes. So we want to have all the nutrients stripped out of the water during treatment, and we use those helpful bacteria to do it. The harmful bacteria are largely removed during our process. So they don't pass through the process, and or they're disinfected from chlorine. In the microbial world, bacteria are the wimps of the pathogen world. Even a very small amount of chlorine really effectively kills those bacteria, like E. coli, like Campylobacter, like Salmonella. It's when you don't have chlorine as part of your treatment, like in Walkerton, when those bacteria can cause illness. So again, it's back to that multi-barrier treatment. Anyway, that was a complicated answer to a great question.
Right, sorry, okay. So this is gonna be our last question for Ian. There's so many more questions, and we're so pleased that so many people are interested, but we do wanna leave some time for, you know, like the OP and stuff like that.
For sure.
So do you find that there are a lot of pharmaceutical substances that end up in the water now?
So for about years, we've been monitoring for pharmaceutical substances, and we monitor about 45 trace substances, things like acetaminophen, you know, different hormones, caffeine. We look for caffeine. The only one that we find, which is really a testament to how clean the river is the one that I mentioned, metformin. And metformin is the most widely prescribed drug in Canada. It's an anti-diabetic drug. So when patients take this medication, most of it is actually excreted through urine, which goes back into the sewage treatment system. and sewage plants are not designed to remove those substances. So, you know, a small amount is getting back into the river. But the level that we're seeing, that's the only one that we see out of 45. And the level we're seeing is 0.00002 parts per million. So it's an exceedingly low concentration. And you'd have to, I think I've got the calculation, you'd have to drink about 500,000 glasses of water a day before you would, you know, get enough of that substance to have any impact at all. So from a health perspective, it's not a concern. If you look at other water sources like the Grand River, or go to Europe where rivers are used 6 or 7 or 8 times over and over, like the Rhine River, you find huge concentrations, or relatively large concentrations of these pharmaceuticals. So ours is probably one of the lowest that I've seen in North America. And why is that? We have a low human population upstream of Ottawa, and we have a huge river. That's a massive water flow. So the short answer is, yeah, we detect just a trace, and only of 1 or 2 substances on occasion. There's a downside to that. I mean, analytically, we can see these things in modern chemistry. We have really sensitive labs that can test. The downside is there's a bit of a psychological residue. People say, oh, just knowing that there might be this trace substance in the water, I know rationally it's not going to affect me, but psychologically, you know, that does cause a little bit of concern for me. And so that's something that we have to try to grapple with.
Ian, unfortunately, we are going to cut it off.
Yeah, sure.
The staff and I were going back and forth about when we're going to cut this off. 8:25. No, let's keep going. That was absolutely amazing, and I just want to tell you how proud I am of the professionalism that our city staff have. I know, obviously, water is everyone's chief concern. I think in the wake of Walkerton, the only thing I can be sent to jail for in doing my job is negligence on water, and I feel as though we're in absolutely excellent professional hands. So thank you very much for bringing that to us this evening.
Well, it's a pleasure, and we appreciate the support we get continuously from councillors like yourself, and frankly from the public. We have a great public confidence and a lot of support. So much appreciated. And like I say, I've got the best job, at least for the next year in the city, and really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to and a privilege to work in drinking water for the Ottawa. So.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. All right. I don't want to tear myself away from that, Fiona. What sort of considerations have we got in the wake of drinking water?
So now we're going to turn just open format Q&A for primarily Jeff or Tom or myself. So there's a few questions already in the queue. I'll start with those. Feel free to put in some more as we keep chatting. First question from Dawn. What happens to R1 zoning on Scott Street from Island Park East to Western when the new official plan is adopted?
That's a really good question. So today, I guess I would have to say, I don't know. The official plan, there was a thrust in the draft version of the official plan that would have made it not illegal, but would not have permitted single detached dwellings to replace single detached dwellings. That he was looking at potentially requiring more density in the residential neighborhoods in order to meet certain density minimums. That's been walked back. So I can say today that I am very confident that we are not going to have density requirements, and we are not going to have a prohibition on most streets against building new single detached dwellings. The section of Island Park, the section of Scott Street, I have been promised, this was probably 4 years ago, would remain rise and not allow mid-rises or high-rises. I have to dig that email up from the city planners, but I suspect that in light of the official plans focus on intensification, and particularly intensification near transit, that the city would probably be, council and the city would probably be willing to entertain greater density. Scott Street is a major corridor. It is, you know, very close to transit stations, 3 of them across the way, plus Kitchissippi Station at the very far end, not far away from Scott. The answer to whether or not that section will remain, you know, purely low rise or even purely single detached housing would come in the comprehensive zoning bylaw that or sorry, the comprehensive zoning review that would come in the next term of council, to set specific zoning for neighborhoods. So on Scott Street, just thinking forward, the new official plan would create the policy grounds to entertain likely mid-rise, and in the comprehensive zoning review, that would probably be on the table, and it will be for the next city council to determine whether or not to change that zoning. I am going to suggest that it is likely inevitable that the single detached dwelling, the R1 zoning, will come under significant pressure, but whether they would move to mid and high rise in that section, I don't know today. The pressure will be there, but I don't know how that will resolve itself.
Thank you. Has the TMP O/D study been further delayed?
Nothing's crossed my desk on that, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the precise timeline for the trans origin and destination study. For those who are just hearing about that, that's a major that we do as part of creating a new transportation master plan. The transportation master plan sort of describes, okay, what are the transportation infrastructure that we need in order to accommodate the kind of growth that is anticipated by the official plan. So the official give the city planners some idea of where people are going to live and in what numbers. It's going to describe where are people going to work, where are they going to live, where are they going to play, very high level. The trans destination origin study actually is a deep dive into where people start their trips and end their trips. So we have a good idea that, you know, there's going to be this many trips from Canada to downtown. There's going to be this many trips from Hintonburg to Baseline. And then that helps to drive the infrastructure that we'll need, either transit infrastructure, active transportation infrastructure, or roads for cars that we need to build. But the transportation master plan has been delayed because we don't know, we can't study traffic patterns because the traffic patterns are so messed up right now. So it is delayed. I believe that is still supposed to be done before the end of this term of council. And but I haven't heard in the past several months of any further delay other than what it already is.
Okay. A question for Tom. Tom, any update on the noise testing of LRT at Parkdale since the installation of the rail dampers?
So they've been working on that for a few weeks. I think they work, I don't know, 2 or 3 days a week. I think it might be on weekends. But anyway, the last I heard is that all the installations will be complete by the end of June. And so guess that's when we'll be able to get a real sense as to what effect this dampening has had. So end of June.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, was across the street this morning, Hilson and Iona, trying to help a small raccoon escape safely from the storm sewer. Thanks for jumping in to help when no one else at the city would. I'm concerned that the city, animal control, wouldn't help, and now we have open drain on Hilson that puts pedestrians at risk after it gets dark. What's the latest?
And I'm sorry, I don't know if raccoon is free or not. One of your neighbors has asked for the city's help in trying to free a raccoon that seems to be trapped in a storm sewer vault. So earlier this morning, I was out just to open up the storm drain and get some boards in for the raccoon to climb up. And if it is unable to do so, or if it's to see whether or not that happens. I will touch base with the neighbor who I was helping out to find out if the raccoon is gone. My preference obviously would be, despite the clear markings of a hazard, and I think a virtual impossibility of somebody accidentally stumbling into it, my preference would be that not be left open long this evening.
Okay. When is Scott Street near the Farm Boy and Westboro station going to be cleaned up, as it is hazardous for cyclists looking for a calmer option other than Richmond?
That's a good question. I'm sorry. Can you email us that, and we'll get in touch with the city to see if they can accomplish a cleanup? Because it is really gravelly.
Roland just followed up saying the T/D study was originally postponed to start this fall, and then he gathers it has been further delayed in recognition that travel patterns have yet to normalize.
Okay. Roland, whatever info you have, could you just email that to me so we're on the same page, and I'll confirm it with transportation staff. I sit on the sponsors group for the transportation master plan, and that hasn't crossed our desk, but sometimes the councillors are the last to know.
I only have one more question in the queue, so if there was anything people were thinking of asking, feel free to put it in the Q&A. We've got 10 minutes left. So Christine's asking, I live in a detached home on a corner. Am I, or will I, be allowed to build up or back on my house if I'd like to in the future? Or will that not be allowed now with the new official plan?
Question, Christine. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to interpret it a little bit. Detached home on a corner, so you're probably in McKellar Park or Westboro. You might be in an R3 zone, or you might be in an R1 zone, where there's either single detached homes only, or where they allow singles, semis, and triplexes. You will be. There is nothing in the official plan that. I'm sorry, Christine. I would need to know where you live. Can you promote Christine, please, and thank you?
Yes.
Just to allow her to ask the question out loud.
So Christine, you're going to be promoted to a panelist. You do not have to turn your video on if you don't want to. So Christine, you can go ahead and unmute so Jeff can get more info.
Yes, okay. Can you hear me? I've got background noise probably.
You're coming in fine,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent, yes. So no, just I live at Tweedsmuir and Clare. So yes, but no plans at all right now for any extension or anything like that, but it's just curious to know what, if basically with the new official plan, if people who have detached homes can build extensions in the future if they want, or build up.
So Tweedsmuir and Clare is in the R3 zone. It allows singles, semis, and triplexes. There is nothing in the official plan that would prevent you from, adding extensions to your home in accordance with the zoning bylaw and the building code. The zoning for that part of the neighborhood is becoming more restrictive in terms of how much room you have to leave in the backyard, but in a corner lot, it's not as much. So what I'm going to suggest, Christine, is the official plan will probably not affect you very much at all in terms of some sort of an extension moving forward.
Right. Okay.
Don't take that to the bank, but that's
No.
that's my best answer.
And I have no plans for it. I love my backyard actually, so I don't think I take any space off of my backyard. And yes, and if there are no other questions, I would like to add a question about trees. It's a little unclear to me how when there is new development, new or intensification, infill, etc., when trees are cut, do they need to replace with another tree, or are shrubs accepted?
Generally speaking, they need a tree to replace them. And unfortunately, Emma's left because she has the specific stuff. But normally, they're looking for a tree to replace a tree. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. The particular rule for any particular infill might be different to the next. But generally speaking, I think the city tries to encourage the replacement of trees with trees. There are sometimes, though, when I think they may not be able to replace a tree in the same place. So the city, they have to provide a value, and the city will try to plant a tree some. It gets a little bit loosey-goosey.
Okay, and that's something that is different in the new official plan, because from what I've seen just right beside me, for example, trees were removed and absolutely no new trees were added. So that's a new addition.
Depending what the servicing for the house is, they might not be able to put a tree where it's been approved. So I would, and forgive me, I'm sorry, I talk out of my butt. If you want to email me with a particular property, I can sort of tell you exactly what those were. The new official plan does have more protections for trees, but it won't get down to the official plan is a very high level plan. It won't get into the details of, replace a tree replacement, for example.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Christine. Respectfully demoting you. We have about 3-4 questions left. Following up on Lori's question, the LRT is much noisier now. Are they going to grind the rails again? I think I heard that they would be doing that.
That's heard. I mean, we can ask them if they're planning on grinding the rails, and we can ask them to grind the rails. Feel that could make a difference. The work that's ongoing right now is the installation absorbing material on the ground, and you've probably seen that if you look down in the trench. There's a growing amount of this stuff that sits. It almost looks like pavers that sits between the rails and to the side of the rails. So that work is continuing. But if you've heard that they're going to be grinding the rails, Cheryl, just drop me an email point and let me know where you're hearing that. We can confirm, because that's not something that's crossed our desk.
Okay. Installation of the Clearview/Island Park Drive crosswalk seems to have been delayed again. Why and when should we now expect it?
August. It's, the work has begun, but it is mostly, I'm guessing, administrative work. So the builder, the city wrote the other day to say, yes, it is now underway, but most of the work is stuff that you will not see until they start constructing it. And Tom, forgive me, how long was it going to take to actually construct it? It's not very long, a couple of weeks.
You're gonna see noticeable work in August, and it is supposed to be operational on the Friday before the Labor Day long weekend.
I need to put something into my calendar, Roland, just to pester them probably once a week to say, are you still on schedule? Are you still on schedule? I appreciate the community's patience on this one. It was delayed due to COVID, but now it is, you know, now that the project is actually proceeding, I'd like to ensure that we don't see any further delays. So we will check in with them from time to time. And Roland, if you nudge me, I will not resent that.
Okay, a few more questions. I think putting green bins along the Byron path in Wellington Village was a great idea. I was wondering if there will be green bins like that on the Byron path on the Westboro side.
That's a good question, Dominique. The green bin pilot program, which is what has green bins in some of our parks, Riverview Terrace, Champlain, Byron Linear, says Byron Linear Park is getting green bins, but you're right that I have not seen any of those once you cross out of, I think once you cross Island Park. So it may be that they're not part of the pilot, but drop me an email and we'll confirm that. I don't want to say anything that I don't know for sure. Because they did say Byron Linear Park, and that goes all the way to Redwood.
Okay. Does the Committee of Adjustment have any power to prevent trees from coming down on a property they have considered? If they do, and a protected tree comes down, what recourse is there?
Good question, Lauren. Committee of Adjustment. A builder is required, sorry, this is a big, long discussion ever since, especially Roosevelt. When a developer wants to develop an infill, something that is new with the passage of the most recent bylaws and changes to the process is that first, the developer will have to show the city a plan for that will include either tree retention or tree removal. The city has taken an active role, I want to say in the last 6 months, in trying to finesse the proposal to the point where more trees can be saved on the property. When it moves forward at the Committee of Adjustment, it will have to say, the plans will have to show which trees are to be removed and which are to be retained. The Committee of Adjustment will approve or not the plans, and they cannot turn down an infill development proposal on the basis that trees will be lost, but they can back. Once it is approved with a plan that shows a tree to be retained, if that tree is then removed because, you know, they cut through half the root ball and it starts falling into the hole, or they otherwise damage it, they'll be in violation of the urban tree conservation bylaw, because they won't have a permit to remove the tree. And then they're subject to the fines that are set out in the urban tree conservation bylaw. So the Committee of Adjustment cannot force a developer to keep a tree in an infill, but by the time it has gotten to the Committee of Adjustment, the City Forestry Department will have weighed in on whether or not it's possible to retain more trees than the developer is proposing. And when it comes out the other side with a plan, that plan is enforceable under the urban tree conservation bylaw.
Okay. That's it. Just Roland suggested putting an update on the crosswalk in your newsletter. So I'm sure.
And I'm sorry, it was a beautiful morning on Saturday, and I didn't have it on my sticky note, and so I failed to put it in. Roland, you're absolutely right. I'll try to remember to put that in this Saturday morning.
We got one last question, so I'm going to read that, and that'll be the last one. We struggle with a Norway maple invading our sewer pipes and my foundation, yet the forestry department won't allow us to replace this invasive tree that the FIT hasn't planted in decades with another more appropriate tree. I understand the need to save trees and we want to maintain a tree, but we can't work to get any traction from the forestry department. Any suggestions? I think this has started as a casework in our office. Jeff, this sounds familiar.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the specific circumstances. A Norway maple, um, it's not quite the same as saving a big oak tree or something like that. But I would need to investigate what you've told the forestry department, what the and then what the forestry department has said. Getting an independent forester and engineer's opinion that the tree, in their professional opinion, is affecting your pipes is probably the first step, because uh, one of the conditions under which a tree removal permit can be extended by the city is that it's damaging your property. But the city wants to see, really rigorous analysis of that before they issue a permit. So I don't want to go too far down the path, because it sounds like this is something you've reached out to our office about, and I need to get on solid ground. But in general, when you want to remove a tree on private property on the basis that it's doing damage, having a professional opinion that it is doing that damage is the first place for the resident to start, because the city is obviously very keen to save trees.
And I could be wrong. It may just be two very similar circumstances. So if you haven't emailed us already, just shoot us an email so we have your contact information to look into this. Okay, that's it for questions. Jeff, do you want to wrap up and then shut it down?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for attending. You know what? We started losing people after Ian Miller's Ian Miller? No.
Ian Douglas.
Thank you, Ian Douglas's presentation. So that was obviously the highlight. For the next forum, I think I'll bring somebody in who can talk to us about poop and what happens to the water on the other side once it goes to Orleans into the Robert O. Pickett sewage treatment plant, because that is also fascinating. So we'll leave it there. I won't go too far down that path. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Again, thank you for your patience as we get through an extremely busy time in the office. And I am looking forward to having discussions about how the initial plan has changed from the draft sometime in the next couple of weeks, call it next couple of weeks, sometime mid-June, probably, before I can get into that. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Fiona, thanks for doing that. Tom, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.